travel can truly be a source of joy. It's the thrill of discovering new places, seeing amazing things, and meeting new people. But traveling can also come with a lot of surprises. Delays, lost luggage, accommodations that don't look like the pictures. The key to navigating the ups and downs lies in getting comfortable with the unexpected. And one aspect of that is holding on to our humanity when things feel out of our control. Today, I'm back with Molly O'Brien, and she's sharing her top 5 tips for being a respectful traveler. What should you consider when choosing a destination if you want to be respectful of local residents?
I feel like it's important to consider the season that you're traveling in, whether or not it's high season or a lower season. And no matter what season it is, managing your expectations of what things are going to be like. In high season, it might be more crowded and it might be harder to get a reservation at the restaurant that you're trying to go to. If it's low season, then it might also take a longer time to get a reservation at the restaurant you're going to, just by way of having less resources in that destination when it's the off season. So being mindful of where you're going, when, and managing those expectations.
We're always thinking, like, what's convenient for me? And for the majority of Americans, we have a pretty set schedule of when our uptimes, downtimes, holidays, school holidays, everything kind of revolves around a pretty similar calendar. So how do we take that into account and make a choice that's good for the residents of somewhere else, but also fits into our schedule?
It could be looking into alternative destinations that you could visit that aren't necessarily the most popular place to visit, but somewhere that could be similar and might not be as crowded and as difficult to manage once you're in the destination. One of my favorite parts of being a travel writer is that there are so many places on this earth, and even in the United States, that are yet to be discovered, and they're waiting for us to enjoy them. People ask me, why are you going to whatever place that they've never heard of before and have no interest in going to? And I say, I'm going there because there's a story there. I just have to find it. There's people that live there. They want to share their community with me, and I want to learn about it. So it doesn't always need to be the hottest destination of the summer. It can be somewhere that you're going to have a great time that might not necessarily be as well known.
Some of those places are the diamond in the rough. They're just the loveliest little town or the loveliest city that you just never would have thought to visit. And sometimes we get lucky and you have to go there for work or a conference, and then you discover, oh my gosh, this place is great. But the world is big. And so when you take into account how many days off, if say you have a 9-to-5 job and you work it your entire working life, you only have a certain amount of days off. It is finite. So you really have to choose carefully where you're going to spend that time. And we see the same places over and over again. But just because Tuscany is the picture we always see doesn't mean that neighboring Umbria isn't just as great and delicious and photogenic.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even planning to go during the so-called off-season here in Colorado. Most of the mountain towns, when it's fall and spring, it's called shoulder season, and it's a lot less crowded and it's a lot more affordable, and it's just as fun to be there.
Let's talk about choosing where to stay a little bit. When does it make sense to seek out local accommodations like B&Bs or like little locally run boutiques versus a big hotel chain?
It depends on what kind of experience you're looking for. It's always good to consider the local B&B and support local. And oftentimes, from my experience, when you're staying somewhere local that's hosted by a local, I've had a better experience just by way of that local sharing their insight with me, sharing little things that I don't think I would have known if I were staying at a more corporate entity. But there are also situations where you don't have a choice and you have to go with the corporate business, and that's okay too, as long as you're being mindful of supporting the local community outside of that one aspect of your experience. Hospitality companies are trying to be more mindful of contributing towards the local communities that they're in. That might not have been as much of a thing 20 or 25 years ago, but now I feel like we're moving towards it with the access to travel that we have, just being more mindful of not making as big of an impact of the destination that we're in. But I like staying at smaller places just because I feel like it's a more connected experience to the local community.
People with dietary restrictions, it can be really scary to travel, especially if you have like a deathly allergy or a pretty serious intolerance. So how do you recommend people respectfully navigate that when they're abroad and say you're offered something that you just can't or really just should not eat or drink? How do you navigate that?
I can personally empathize with that because I got diagnosed with this thing called SIBO last year, where the bacteria in my gut is just very off. So I'm not supposed to have gluten or onion or garlic. Those are in everything. So I am just very mindful of doing research beforehand and making sure that as best I can, I'm not going to put myself in a position to be potentially putting off whoever's hosting me, and just being open and honest. If someone told me I'm allergic to nuts, that's not something that you can change. Just being empathetic about their allergy and working with it. But I do have to say, this is one of my favorite travel stories to tell. I was in Greece when I was studying abroad in college on a trip, and I think I was in Athens, and I went to a local restaurant and I ordered a Greek salad, and I asked for it without the olive oil. And the cook came out after I put in the order and he admonished me. He said, in my village, we have 1.5 ounces of olive oil. We drink it straight every day and we live to 100. I felt like such an idiot because I wasn't trying to insult this cook in this small restaurant in Athens. It was purely because I knew it wouldn't be great for my stomach and my digestion if I invested in it. But it was a great learning experience for me because I realized when you're in another country and you're trying to work with their customs, you have to be mindful of the way that they live their life and be respectful of that.
Yes, I totally agree. And it does get sticky, especially when it's very, very serious. So I have a story. I was on a media trip in Costa Brava, Spain, most delicious place in the world, but very heavy on the olives and the anchovies. And if I had to have two things that I'm just not trying to eat ever, it's olives and anchovies. Those darling people, they took us to the factory where they make these world famous anchovy stuffed olives. And we had a camera crew from the local news following us around. And so I'm like, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? Now, it's not an allergy, so not the end of the world, not super serious. But this darling woman with a tray full of anchovy stuffed olives walks up to me and pretty much puts one in my mouth on camera. And I just like chewed it and smiled, but wanted to die. So I was, trying to be that good traveler. And I was like, that has to give me some brownie points in my good traveler travel bank because I just ate the two things that I would just rather die than eat. So sometimes if it's not going to physically harm you, you can do it. But again, you can be super prepared. I actually have a friend who has celiac and she has these amazing maps for different countries and their food maps. And so they've got in the language what you can have, what you can't have, why you can't have it. And so you can take that with you when you go to, say, Vietnam, and it's got everything. So you show it to the person you're eating and you say this, this, and this, and they understand why. And so everybody's on the same page. There's no confusion because you cannot risk it if you have a very serious allergy.
Yeah, it's not an insult towards them. It's just the way that your body works. And by way of being human, there are people across the world with all sorts of intolerances and allergies. And personally, I feel like they're respectful of it if they understand why you are making the decision that you're making.
Traveling is stressful. It can be airports and train stations are super busy. So much planning is involved and so much can go wrong. So what's your best tip for just keeping your cool when things are super stressful?
Just taking yourself out of the situation briefly, just almost seeing it from above and realizing this is only temporary. That's more philosophical. On a more physical level, headphones. These headphones that I'm wearing right now have saved me in so many stressful situations when it comes to boarding airplanes, taking that little train in Denver that goes between all the terminals and everyone's squished together and there's yelling and there's just this energy that you have when you're in a stressful travel situation and just kind of blocking out those, it sounds really woo-woo, but blocking out the bad vibes, being able to disconnect and just breathing. I feel like when we're traveling, we forget these basic things or we're not able to do them to a certain healthy degree. Like if you are more mindful of how you're taking care of your body and your mind while you're traveling, it's going to be a lot more pleasant. Making sure you have snacks, for example, especially if you have dietary restrictions like me, making sure that you have snacks that you know that you can eat. You're not going to be hangry or you're not going to eat something that'll make you ill. And then having headphones and something that can kind of save you from a sensory perspective and make sure that you can keep your cool.
You just never know when you're going to sit on the runway for 5 unexpected hours and there's not food or drink. So always food and drink. always headphones. And then, like you said, mindfulness, just knowing that it's going to be probably a stressful situation because travel just is. Airports are not a peaceful place by and large. They're just an absolute maelstrom. So just be ready for it and be mindful. And if that means taking extra time to yourself, getting up earlier, stepping aside, they have quiet rooms inside most airports that are, the chapel or the meditation room. You can go in there and just have some time to yourself. Because like you said, being around that many people is going to be a challenge no matter what.
I appreciate how airports and other public travel spaces are making a lot of progress towards providing spaces that are accommodating of people that might have sensory challenges. So being mindful of if you're traveling with someone or if you yourself have those kinds of sensory challenges, preparing and being aware of where you can go, that you can get some peace and quiet and kind of disconnect and reconnect with yourself. When we're traveling, it's to learn about ourselves. It's to learn about the people that we're with. It's to learn about the world. And you can't be open to learning something new unless you're ready to be uncomfortable and be okay with sitting in that discomfort and being open to learning about something you might be unfamiliar with.
And that's the trade-off, right? Like we want those new experiences. We want to learn. We want to meet new people. But the journey can be just as interesting as the destination once you get to it, right? So basically, we pack our patience and our empathy and our compassion for others, and we pack it in our carry-on and our headphones, and that's how you have a successful trip. Molly O'Brien, thank you for joining us, and thank you, our listeners, for being with us. If you're planning a trip, be sure to connect with a AAA travel advisor. Check out AAA.com/travel or visit your local branch. This podcast is a production of Auto Club Enterprises. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. I'm Angie Orth. Thank you for traveling with AAA.